Welcome back to another episode of Mind, Body, Spirit. I'm Dr. Kayte, and today's guest is a doctor. She's a psychotherapist who works as a marriage and family counselor. She also has a PhD and primarily focuses on sex therapy. She's also the author of this book, The New Sex Bible for Women. Please welcome to the show, Miss Amie Harwick.
Thanks,
Dr. Amie Harwick. Hi, how are you?
Great. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you so much for coming. You look amazing.
Thank you.
When you see patients, like, how does that go? When they walk in the door?
I don't wear red lipstick in my office. That's my only red lipstick is reserved for outside of the office. But
Right.
yeah, I look a little bit more toned down at work.
Wow. So well, we could get into that later. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you do?
Okay, yeah, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, so I work with clients in my private practice in relation to mental health issues. And because I specialize in sexuality, a lot of my clients come to me either because there's some type of sexual issue or they're part of a lifestyle that they don't want to be judged for, and they want somebody that understands and is less judgmental or non-judgmental about what they participate in or how they identify.
Wow, that's really interesting. And then tell me more about your book and how that came about. And
my book's really interesting. It's an interesting path because I think we assume that sometimes we make all of our connections through our field that we're in.
Okay.
And prior to being a therapist, I was a performer. I was a fire eater. I worked every side job to put myself through school. So I did bartending and did a lot of like extra work in movies, like one line, like Club Girl number 5. So everything I could do to just get the money to put myself through school, and I was a workaholic. So through that, I met a photographer named Holly Randall, who was the photographer for this book publishing company. All their books look like this. They're beautiful hardcover books with glamour photography, gorgeous people. So she said, this publishing company is always looking for people with higher education to write these books, specifically therapists and doctors.
Wow, okay.
And she connected me. So my connection to get my book that's helped me so much professionally was actually through a connection I made to a woman when I worked in more of the entertainment
Totally.
realm.
And that makes sense because books are basically entertainment. And I feel like a lot of times some of the true writers and the true people, they can't get it out there because they don't have those connections,
and
right?
This day and age with everything being digital and accessibility online, it's actually really hard to get a book that is distributed widely. So you could always self-publish and write whatever you want and vocalize whatever opinion you want and not be censored. I was really fortunate with this. They hired me to write the book, and the distribution was in every Barnes & Noble, every bookstore, so that was amazing.
Yes.
But they did want it to be a little bit more mainstream, so I was trying to write about kink and diversity, and they're like, let's just keep it as more mainstream. Okay, fine. So if there's another one coming later, which probably will be all my own voice, it will be more related to diversity.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about kink right now, we can do that. That's totally fine. We'll get it out there.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, tell me more about kind of some of the issues, like the most interesting current issues that you're seeing with relationships and people that you work with.
Yeah, I think the assumption, being a sex therapist or being a therapist that works with sexuality, is I work with sex addiction, which isn't a diagnosis. It's not something that we support. Being called that. Absolutely not. It is not a diagnosis. So you're never going to go to a therapist and be diagnosed as a sex addict. That's not going to happen. You might be diagnosed with a compulsivity issue. And that compulsivity issue might play out in sexual behaviors, but sex addiction is not recognized by my license or by ASECT, which is the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. But I do see some compulsive sex behavior. That's a very small part of my practice.
Right.
A lot of the people I work with are very focused on navigating through being single in LA as a young adult. And that is a large part of my practice. So they might come for other things might have happened in their life, but a lot of what I hear people talk about and having distress over is, how do I navigate dating apps? How do I communicate on a date? How do I have the in-person interactions and set boundaries as I'm beginning a relationship? And these are questions as old as time and relationships, but now bringing in the digital age and dating apps that are constantly changing. Our culture's changing. So I hear a lot of people really work through that.
And that being something in LA, it probably affects it, but you could relate that to other cities too, right?
Absolutely. I think LA being a bigger city that attracts people that are trying to make it in entertainment brings a whole other dynamic to it. But that's something that people struggle with everywhere.
Right. And do you think it's true, like when they say that no one in LA settles down? Or we know people do, but that's kind of the assumption, right? That it's so hard to find a partner because everyone's so focused on their career.
Focus on career, and I think that here, as opposed to elsewhere, there's a little more emphasis on the next best thing. and look at how these dating apps are set up with the swipe based. Okay, this person looks good, but who's next? I can swipe through 100 people and hope for bigger, better, more exciting, more attractive. And so even the system, the way our system is set up on these dating apps, it really emphasizes the next better thing.
Right.
Whereas instead of focusing on what's in front of you and how that can create connection and attachment.
Yeah, and even it's interesting, I never thought about this, but from a psychological perspective, the makers of these apps have to be considering that. Like they don't want you to get married and get off the app. They want you to stay on the app, right?
Well, they want you to stay on the app. They want more screen time, just like any other app. And they want people to post about it. They want
talk
the
about
marketing,
it. Yeah.
Right. And there are dating companies, matchmaking services that want you to find a partner. They want you to be off of their service.
Like which ones?
Just more dating services, like in-person dating services. And there are some apps that do emphasize that they hope you to be off the app. I think it's The League is one that I've had some clients work with recently. Their
ads are like insanely douchey though. Have you seen?
Ads are very douchey, and some of the people on there, it's different. It's just different than the other apps, but they are hoping people are going to be off in 4 months.
Wow.
So I read.
Okay.
But there is a lot of marketing put into all of these. So if you're looking for love, that's something to be cautious of. Is just like anywhere else. Just if you go into a bar and look for somebody, not everybody is there for a relationship. So you have to clarify, you have to set boundaries, and it's going to be far and few between, but it's possible.
So tell me some of the things that men have struggled with on dating apps that you've seen that you could share.
I do work with a lot of men that are more shy, more introverted, and trying to navigate this. So typically men that I work with that seek therapy to work through that tend to not be as assertive or extroverted. So how do they present, or how do they interact? Also people, so men I work with, but also people have difficulty taking in the ghosting or the non-responsiveness in the communication because there's so much plentiful options. Why do I keep this conversation going? So people just stop talking to you. And that's very common. Unfortunately, that's a normative behavior with dating apps. So helping people and supporting them through maybe having that thicker skin and dealing with these apps that can feel really hard.
So you're kind of having to tell them, don't have these like one-line conversations with 20 women, try to focus on one.
It's actually the opposite study. So here's the science in what's been looked at so far. So people are studying it, and sociologists are looking at these things in more academic studies, and they found that for success on dating apps, it is actually quantity over quality. The more people you can have interaction with, the more likely you're going to get out on dates. And after that, the more likely you could form a relationship. So in person, quality over quantity when you're actually on that date. But as far as the dating apps, it is a matter of reaching out to more people and seeing more people. So I tell my clients that are trying to find a relationship, if you go out on 1 date a week, maybe that's a coffee date or a second date with somebody. But if you go out on 1 date a week, that's 52 opportunities to create connection in a year. And you're probably going to find it, but you have to get out there and do it.
And then so what about for women? Like what are some of the mistakes you see?
I think navigating through men that are looking for sex as opposed to a relationship, if they're looking for a relationship. And that's also an assumption too, is that we're all looking for relationships.
Of course.
And I think that some people can be confident in saying, I'm looking for sex, or I'm looking for casual interaction only.
Absolutely.
And letting people come to that conclusion and feel confident about that, and that's okay. It's important too.
So how do you tell based on someone like on the profile, like what they're, is it just a matter of asking?
You just have to ask, and if you go out on a date with them and they present with certain actions, you have to listen when people are talking and watch how they behave. Because I think especially as women, I think we're taught to minimize behavior of our partners, and it's okay, it's all right, I'm being understanding, I'm empathetic. But if somebody shows you behavior that is telling you that he's probably, or he or she is not honest or not clear, or they're withholding information, that's important to consider.
Yeah. And like, are there specific body language cues or things you could look for that?
No, body language is also very important, but if people are non-disclosing or they're dancing around certain issues, if they're not clear and upfront, that's a big indicator.
Yeah. Do you find that there's a certain amount of that just being in Los Angeles, that people present themselves dishonestly, or?
I think so. I think a little bit more here. It makes me sound so jaded about LA, but we do live in a city that there's a higher prevalence of narcissism because of the industries that we have. To function in an industry based on how you look and how you appear and how you present, that's going to attract more people with certain personality characteristics that might be fun, exciting, intense for short term, but may not always relate to the long term. But there are those people out there. You just have to be perceptive of it.
Yeah, that is so true. And I love the way you said that. So I'm kind of want to go back just a little bit to what we were talking about earlier about sex addiction, because we're talking a lot about dating apps, but what comes to mind for me is thinking about pornography on the internet and how much that's changing sexual preference and just sort of like the availability, like you mentioned, the availability of swiping, but when it comes to like, you know, delving into your sexual appetite, men are, and I read a study where they were, I don't know if you probably know this one, basically they were looking at the ejaculation time with the same partner, like for a man and a woman, and it was like, the first time with one woman, it was 5 minutes, and then the second time it was 6 minutes, and then it was 10 minutes, 15. But when they gave a man a new partner, like in the same period, it was 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. So I was reading that kind of happens with the internet because they can just continuously until they basically fall over.
So there's a really good point in that study. I haven't read that particular study, but it gives the results of something that has been something studied for a long period of time, which is men, but not just men, but people are attracted to two things: novelty and variety.
Okay.
So new and different.
Okay.
And that's just human nature. So that doesn't mean that monogamy or having one partner isn't ever going to work out. I think people use that evidence and say, well, you know, monogamy doesn't work. Might as well be open relationship or poly.
I would say more just that means pornography is dangerous because it can, especially if you're 13 years old and you have this breadth of exposure, I just wonder how that affects their brain as they develop.
The accessibility to early exposure to sexual images and sexual ideas, that can be destructive depending on how that's handled. If kids are exposed to things early and nobody's telling them what's healthy or realistic, that absolutely can go in a bad direction, which is why family education about sexuality and being supportive of children's sexuality is so important. But that's a conversation a lot of people don't like to have.
And how would you, I mean, this is such a deep topic, we could go in so many directions, but how would you, what advice could you give to parents, I mean, that want their kids, and the children in a lot of situations are more technologically advanced than the parents right now. I mean, that'll change, but.
Right, so monitoring children's and kids and teenagers' use of electronic devices is so important. And I know there's ways around all that. I'm not the tech person, so I know it's okay. Talk about that. I just moved and I don't really know how to set up my television, so I'm not the person to talk
I don't even have a television anymore.
Okay, yeah, you win.
Yeah, okay. But I do, yeah. Okay.
So, but there are apps and things like that to monitor these things, but the parents are responsible for monitoring as much as possible and having those discussions. When children are little or when they're adolescents, it just takes that one body language or word that induces shame that will cause and can lead to a lifetime of sexual issues. I see clients now that are middle-aged or older adults that'll say, you know, when I was younger, I was masturbating, my parents caught me, and they said, oh, that's not good, or something just so small.
Right.
And that stuck with them and has created, whether it's a direct line to certain types of fetishism from the initial shaming, or feeling sex negative or negative about themselves and their sexuality.
Right.
So it's so important to create a space for children to say this is normal and healthy, and for parents to understand what's normal and what's healthy. I've seen parents discuss children being sexual, like on a playground, or touching each other, or touching themselves, and then saying that's it, they must have been molested, this is so abnormal, what's wrong with these children? And that's actually very normal. There's studies that show that in utero, fetuses actually brush their hands or body parts over their genitals because there's nerve endings there, and it feels good. So they're not sexually fantasizing, but it's innocent. It feels nice, just like touching your skin feels nice. So it's important for families to support that and create a space that's non-shaming and education-based. I think we're a long ways away from having a culture like that, but there's organizations, I think it's Sex Positive Families, that provides education for people to look up. I know they have an Instagram that's trying to educate people even through social media. But starting young and being able to support and not hide people from pornography, not show it to them, but not hide it and shelter people either. So saying this is what's out there and this is what's natural, normal, and healthy. Here's how you can protect yourself. That's really important.
So you would say sort of what's available in the world of pornography and ever growing is fine? And
well, I mean, the accessibility is high, so everything is out there and very easily available. I think I wrote about this in my book, and I talk about the story a lot.
Okay, we'll have to check it out.
Yeah, there's this like story I tell about my mom. My mom, she's really mad that I tell people this. She called me and she was like, you know, I want to get like a sexy DVD and I don't know what to get. This is like 10 years ago. And I was thinking she meant like Showgirls or like an NC-17, you know, movie. And I'm like, oh, like Basic Instinct or something.
Iceman or
something. Aquaman now. Like
that's what I meant.
Sexy He's got great eyes.
That's exactly, you know what I meant though.
So I realized that she was very embarrassed and trying to ask me where she would buy something that was X-rated.
Okay.
And in my mind, living in LA, we could just go to the Pleasure Chest, and we have these sex-positive employees there, and a lot of them are, you know, want to go to school to be therapists. And we have things that are accessible in San Francisco, New York, and LA that people don't have elsewhere.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more shame going into sex shops and adult stores in other places in the country. So I realized she was trying to ask me that. I'm like, oh, well, you probably just want to go on Vivid's website. They have more easy to digest stuff. And then I looked myself and I thought, everything that is available easily when you look up just, I want to buy an adult DVD, is so extreme that it's becoming the norm that things that were fringe before or alternative have become so accessible and mainstream. So when an adolescent or an adult looks up pornography, they're looking at things that are maybe not what you would do on the first time you sleep with a new partner. And they're thinking that's normal. So I think we need to talk about what's normalized and also how do we discuss and consent with people if these are things that they're interested in, because young people are thinking that, you know, having anal on a first date is something that's normative and doesn't need discussion, when something like that is something that absolutely needs to be discussed and talked about with boundaries and consent.
Right. It definitely raised a lot of questions. Like, was the old time of being a very conservative in our interaction, was that normal, or is the way it's going the normal? I mean, and
things are feeding off each other. So is pornography reacting to our culture, or is our culture reacting to what's being created by the adult industry? And it is both.
Right. I mean, and even you could look at things like body modification styles and changes across like the world historically, and it's similar weirdness. But I don't know, I just think about addiction and exploiting like the biological need to procreate for profit with extra variety, when in the old days we wouldn't have had access to that much variety. I mean, you physically weren't close to people that were so different.
It wasn't accessible. The variety and the newness wasn't as accessible. When people say back in the 50s, people were stuck in their marriages and they stayed committed. Well, they had less novelty and variety, and the culture was a lot more conservative. So it was a cultural byproduct of what was happening at the time. I think that there's definitely a benefit to pornography. I tell clients to watch porn, but I tell them to look at things that are sex positive, feminist porn, things that represent a variety of body types. Looking at stimulation of something sexual can be arousing. It can be something you can do with a partner, but if it's disruptive in your life, if you're finding yourself doing it every day and you're late for work and you have a hard time connecting with others because you're so consumed with watching pornography, or the expectations from what you're watching doesn't match to what you're having in your life and your relationships, then that could be problematic. So I don't use the term sex addiction. However, the compulsivity and the involvement in it can absolutely be destructive, depending on how you're using it, just like anything else.
And would you suggest to any men listening that might think they fall into that category to do like a break or a fast from pornography,
just
or how
like
would they?
Anything else,
or women,
you think that if you're denying that you have an issue with something, no matter what it is, coffee, alcohol, drugs, pornography, quit for 30 days.
Try stopping.
So I challenge people that I work with. Okay, you don't think you have a problem with whatever it might be. Don't do it for 30 days. Compulsivity with dating apps, using Instagram, whatever it is. Just don't do it for 30 days. See how you feel. And if they're having psychological withdrawals or anxiety, depression, if they're having byproduct emotions or physical responses from not having whatever the stimulus is, that's a problem.
And then they need to come see you, right?
Or maybe they're already seeing me, and then we work through what those feelings are, the overwhelming anxiety because they're not doing or participating in whatever it might be. So I don't see as much of the compulsivity with porn. I do hear women being concerned a lot that their partner is watching porn too much and they feel intimidated, and that could be the female partner, or you know, I'm talking about gender because of what I see the most, but it goes both ways. But the cultural assumption that as a woman, pornography is threatening. But what about trying to watch it together? Like
Right.
joining it and making it a couple's experience that then is about attachment, something you're doing together that can be fun and exciting rather than something the other person does alone and is secretive about. And so there's definitely ways to work with it and join it rather than fight it. But it depends on the situation and the person and the couple.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Wow. And our time has like flown by. I feel like we barely scratched the surface. Well, thank you very much for coming. Where can people find you to get more information?
You can find me on, well, my website's just like an online business card, but you can look there for information. I mean, that's dramieharwick.com.
Okay.
Amie is AMIE. You can look at Instagram, where I post things that I'm doing, or sometimes mental health memes that I find fun for myself and I want to share with people. And that's Dr. Amie Harwick. On Instagram, Facebook. I have a Twitter. I don't really use it. I don't really get Twitter, but I have one. So those are all the places. And I'm in private practice in West Hollywood. And I do like some lectures and speaking and media stuff. So.
Great. And I heard maybe teaching more soon, right?
Yeah, I might take that on.
I think that would be amazing.
I'm debating.
Yes. All right. Well, again, thank you so much for coming. This has been so informative and
for
fun.
having me.
Yeah. Well, this has been another episode of Mind, Body, Spirit. I'm Dr. Kayte. This is Dr. Amie. And we thank you so much for joining us today. Have a wonderful rest of your day.